All right, everybody, buckle up because today we are diving headfirst into the world of Fun ID and their latest work. You guys sent in some seriously interesting reviews and even some snippets of the text itself, these stones everyone's talking about. And let me tell you, this is not your typical book club read.
That's putting it lightly, I'd say. We're having a whole different animal here. It's like, imagine trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where every single piece is like a philosophical riddle. And not only that, but it's also wrapped up in something that looks like a cryptic tweet. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting from Vanai.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my interest even more now. So break it down for me. What exactly are these stones? What kind of rabbit hole are we about to go down?
Well, from what I'm gathering from the reviews, it's basically a collection of 1,000 of these stones. And each one is like its own little world, its own passage. And they are dense. I mean, packed with these really huge, like, mind-bending ideas about what it means to be human, the role technology plays in all of it, freedom, even chaos. I mean, we're going deep here. It's like when you look through a kaleidoscope, right? Each time you turn it, you get a different burst of color, different pattern. That's kind of what these stones are like, but they all come together to form something bigger, something more.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely getting some think outside the box vibes here. But I have to ask, the reviews also mention that Ungry has a really unique writing style. What's the deal with that?
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Cola D uses a ton of wordplay, almost as if they're creating a whole new language, but within the one we already know. And this repetition of "oh" that pops up everywhere, it's like they're trying to use language in a totally different way, almost like music.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to put their finger on those feelings and ideas that are just so massive, Like regular words just can't quite get the job done.
Exactly. And the fact that these stones are all fragmented and non-linear, it's almost like Cola D is making a statement about how we experience the world these days. Think about it. Social media, constant notifications, information overload. It's like our brains are being pulled in a million different directions all at once. These stones, in a way, could be a reflection of that.
Whoa. Okay. So what you're telling me is we're not just talking about a book here, are we? It's like a whole new way of looking at language, at meaning, at the world around us. I have a feeling this is going to be a deep dive for the books.
You better believe it.
Yeah.
Fasten your seatbelts, because we're just getting started.
All right, so let's actually crack open one of these stones and see what makes it tick. This excerpt you sent over, it really grabbed my attention. Whose, whosies, Philistia, Helisha, Patalish, Elsalisha, Nonafus, Elisha, Osuhasayosi. It is the Bakrats who Gordus, who lived it as into a callus by an other people who are like, where's our uncurry? He's like, oh, so this is the drost in you. Oh,
yeah.
It's intense.
That is a perfect example of exactly what we were just talking about. You can practically feel the raw energy just like leaping off the page, all that frustration when words fail.
Yeah, it's like PsyID is taking us right to that edge, to that breaking point where language just loses all its power and something way more primal takes over. It's definitely intense.
It really is. And you know what else? Notice how even in all that chaos, there's that O. Again, it's like a beacon, or maybe even like a cry for help amidst all that noise.
You know what I mean? It's like that feeling you get when you're trying to explain something really complex, I guess, and the words, they just don't fit. They don't do the thing.
Yeah.
But Zadie takes that feeling and they just like amplify it, explode it on the page.
Totally. And honestly, that's what makes their writing so compelling, so thought-provoking, because haven't we all felt that disconnect, right, between language and what's actually real at some point?
Right. And then, almost like whiplash, we go from that to something totally different. This one, Shirulio, clouds of exploded stars in our eyes. It's like, whoa, talk about a perspective shift.
Right. It's almost like Star D is making us, like forcing us to constantly expand and contract our focus. 1 minute we're dealing with these really intense personal emotions, and the next we're like contemplating the entire universe.
And maybe that's the whole point, right? To show us how those things are always connected. That even our smallest, most human moments are happening against this backdrop of like this incredible cosmic vastness.
Exactly. Smarty is not afraid of those big questions, those existential questions. Not at all.
Speaking of big questions, this next one really threw me for a loop. Eve Jamayan, which is something like, one must write complete nonsense sometimes. And not legs, right? And her and like what's happening here? Is It's already messing with us.
That's part of the beauty of ID's work. It keeps you guessing. But that nonsense, it's actually intentional. It's that linguistic recursion the reviews were talking about. They're playing with language, bending the rules, almost like challenging us to keep up.
So it's like they're saying, hey, language, it's not this fixed, rigid thing. It's meant to be fluid, playful. And sometimes, maybe the best way to find meaning is to break it all apart and then put it back together in a totally different way.
You got it. And in a world where we are absolutely bombarded with information 24/7, maybe that's the key to actually seeing things differently, to thinking for ourselves, to question everything, even the words we use to make sense of the world.
I gotta say, diving into Keicher's work, it's kind of like trying to grab a handful of sand, It's exhilarating for sure, but you're never quite sure what you're going to come up with. It reminds me of that feeling you get when you're scrolling through a million things online and nothing really sticks. It's like Sanaide is like grabbing us by the shoulders and saying, hey, deal with this. Find the meaning in all this chaos.
It's a totally different way to experience reading, that's for sure. I think some people might even find it frustrating. But honestly, that's also what makes it so unique, so brilliant.
Yeah.
We're living in a world that's completely obsessed with easy answers, with instant gratification. Give me this sound bite, not the symphony. But Panadi just tosses all that out the window and says, hey, you want something more? You got to work for it.
I get that. I can see how some people might find it, I don't know, a little intimidating. Like I'm already trying to wrap my head around the nature of reality, and now I got to learn a whole new language on top of it. But at the same time, there's a part of me that's really drawn to that challenge,
Yeah.
It's like Panadi isn't interested in just giving us all the answers. They're inviting us along on the journey to question everything.
Exactly. And that's a big part of what makes them so different. Hamby isn't just talking about the human condition. They're wrestling with the very tools that we use to understand it. It's like they're saying, okay, here's the hammer and chisel. Now let's make something together. Let's sculpt something new.
So for our listeners out there, the ones who might be feeling a little overwhelmed right now, but also totally intrigued, what's the one thing you hope they take away from this deep dive? What makes Hanmi's work worth all the effort, even if it's not always a walk in the park?
At its core, Tirodi's work is a testament to the power of language, to what it can do, what it can become. I know, it seems kind of backwards, right? Breaking language apart to show us how powerful it really is. But by pushing those boundaries, by shattering them even, they make us re-examine our whole relationship with words, with meaning, with how we make sense of the world around us. And in a world that feels like it's spinning more and more out of control, that's a pretty powerful thing to have.
It's like they're giving us permission to play with language again, to rediscover that magic, that element of surprise. And it's not just about passively taking in information. It's about wrestling with it, making it your own, finding your own meaning in all the chaos.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. But hey, listeners, maybe after spending some time with Tirodi and these stones, you'll feel inspired.
It could happen.
Maybe you'll even want to create something yourselves.
Maybe even your own stone.
That's right. Don't be afraid to dive into the deep end. You might just surprise yourself with what you discover. Until next time.